Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Why I Love Disney podcast. I'm here as always with my friends Easton and David. How are you guys, fellas?
Hey.
How's it doing?
Doing fantastic. Excited to talk a little about Disney news for you today. It's been a little bit slow, and I've been kind of watching the stock price recently. Some of my kids and a couple of my kids in their little investment portfolios have invested in Disney, so they've been super excited about watching and getting into this. And actually, year to date, Disney's up about 20%. Of course, some would argue that it couldn't have gone any lower, but it is like a short term, for short term anyway. It's done reasonably well. Do you guys keep up with it at all? What's the sentiment like? I know we're not a stock podcast, but I mean we do occasionally bring it up here.
Yeah, I've also noticed how many times I do listen to a lot of Disney content, and how people always are saying, we don't give financial advice.
Yeah.
But I do follow a lot of them. Now, where would the stock price be since 2020?
Let's look at the 5-year chart here. Pre-COVID, Disney stock was trading at January 1st, 2020.
Right.
Okay, when we actually started this podcast, right when we started, Disney was trading at a 146.50, and since then it is down about 20%. It looks like from that.
But did it not get up much higher than 146?
After COVID, it crashed down to $85 was its intraday low, right? But everything did, so that's not on it. And then it quickly, because of Disney Plus, early 2001, actually March 12th, 2001, it peaked at an all-time high of $197.16.
Because I was going to say, it got close to $200 a share.
Yep, got right just under $200 a share, and that was all in the streaming business furor. Zoom stock price was crazy. Netflix, anything that had to do with online streaming was just going gangbusters. Any of what you would call like COVID-related bumps were going crazy. And that's with the parks. The parks had just been to scaled reopenings, I think, then. Because parks were closed for in Florida for at least several months, right?
Not as long in Florida as in California, but yes.
Right. California was more like a year. I think in China, of course, it was, completely down. So this is remarkable that the stock price would go crazy. But then since then, it's been a steady and slow march down.
Right.
Bob Iger retires, right? And he did that right before COVID.
Right when we started the podcast, 2020, Chapek was coming in, because we talked a lot then. I remember us having conversations because a lot of the parks vlogs and blogs that I read and watch were not happy about Bob Chapek coming in, because they thought from the beginning, he would nickel and dime a lot of things and raise prices and do all these things. And I would mention some of that, and you would talk about, well, the stock prices are going up. I mean, so we would talk about those things back then.
That's right. And I think history has now proven that Bob Chapek did indeed nickel and dime people.
A lot of which I don't think we'll know the reality of until maybe years down the road, when they do Imagineering story part 2. And we really find out if Iger was gone or not, because a lot of people don't think he ever really maybe for about a 6
He's lurking in the shadows.
Yeah, he never left his office. Like a 6-month period that he was still on the board. So there was maybe a 6 month there was only 9 months that Bob Chapek was in charge. Most things didn't even get greenlit. Most things that they're doing now were greenlit before he even was, in charge. So a lot of people, a lot of news sites don't really believe, Iger didn't have his hand in everything. So all these ups and downs, a lot of these things that from the beginning, it's hard to know who was responsible. It's the same way with the stock price going up and down. Now, a lot of these things, like with Nelson Peltz and this Trian Group and this, things happen. Those things make stock prices go up and down. Definitely the movie's not doing well. Movie losses, I would think, have to take the stock price down, because your confidence that they're going to have a hit goes down. So
If you were talking sentiment only, there are I think 2 to 3 major factors from the all-time high to it getting to back down to the low is December 23rd, 2022, $88. Then it hit it again at November or October of last year. It hit $79 on right before Halloween of just this past season.
Right.
That's like a crazy low, right?
Right.
But two things. One, the streaming furor came with a little bit of a reality check that, oh my goodness, it costs a lot of money to produce all these new Star Wars shows and these Marvel shows and all this new content that are going to keep our viewers locked into our Disney Plus subscription. And how are we ever going to make this profitable, right? That became a realization. The other thing is the nickel and diming of Bob Chapek led to a lot of negative fan sentiment, right? Which we discussed. We're a part of that negative fan sentiment, right? Park reservations, Genie Plus, and all of the things around that. And then just increase in ticket prices, just steady increase in ticket prices. Doing a lot of park fan things that were not friendly to what we all know and expect of Disney. And those just took a slight toll. And then they decided to pick a fight with Ron DeSantis and the Florida government. And it got into the culture wars and found themselves in with just torches flaming from both sides, just bombs coming. And let me tell you, if you're a big company that relies on families for your income, that is not a fight you want to be in. And I think those three things kind of converged to be just it's been a difficult time for Disney in their stock price over the last few years. Would you agree with
I
that?
would, and I would also add that on the side of that you've got the Parks crowd, which there's a Parks fan base they are so Parks loyal, and even they love the Parks regardless of what the movies are doing or regardless of what's going on in politics. But if the parks aren't improving and things are breaking down and things aren't working well and they don't see development in the parks, they're very outspoken. I mean, and the media, that the negative media that can go out on something like YouTube from people that are angry that the parks aren't doing what they want them to do. That's another sentiment. I think that we've talked about that on a couple podcasts ago, but just the amount of negative criticism that goes out on Disney, it seems like it's just multiplied so much in the last 5 years. I can't Since we started this podcast in 2020, I'm amazed at the overall negativity that's out there, and that's one of the reasons when we even started this, I wanted to call the podcast "Why I Love Disney," because I really wanted to really say we need to focus on things we love because there's so much negative already out there. But I think all those things definitely have an impact on people's confidence in the company, and I think that would have to definitely, as with stockholders, if you were a stockholder and a fan, it would definitely have to affect it. But a lot of the stockholders probably aren't fans. They've just invested into a company that they know is
It's all about the bottom line.
It's been
For sure.
so they're just wanting to make a profit. They don't care where the profit comes from, if it comes from movies or parks or whatever. So
Yeah, my question is like, how much of this is sentiment and how much of this is reality? Because it's seemingly Universal Studios, and Universal is Comcast. That's a huge corporation with all sorts, kind of like Disney, but their theme park business just seemingly can't do any wrong in the last 5 years. They seem to hit every button. At very least, I say seems because the sentiment is they're just kicking butt and taking names, and they're building this new park, and there's all this positive momentum and press. And Disney, it seems the sentiment is doing less, right? However, I want to ask you, David, is that completely fair?
well, I think that's one of the things that I'm constantly watching for is like what is real, because I think on every front you'll hear two arguments, just like we have in politics so much. Every news story has two different spins,
Right.
and so it feels like that a lot. But I do think there's a lot that needs to be fixed for sure. I would definitely say my trust level in the lead, not in the original vision of this company or the quality of the product of this company, but in the leadership. I've definitely been surprised, confused, and a little bit let down on this. Well, not just a little bit, a lot let down on this leadership, because I don't think they should be in this place, and they've kind of put themselves into it, and now they're dealing with all this negative press and low stock prices, and so my confidence is down. I love Disney. I love the company. I love what it has stood for 100 years, but they've let other things overshadow what most people love about this company, and I'm sad about that. I'm frustrated about it, but I have to be really careful because there's so much news out there. You can really get sucked in. I mean, there's a lot of people, who make their living off of telling negative news on everywhere, and
Well,
so
the
you have to be
extremes move the needle, right?
right,
Nobody, the
right,
middle of the road, like, well, it's kind of good, kind of bad. That doesn't sell anything. Nobody's
right,
clicking on that article, right?
right. But I definitely think there are more negative sites now, and those are the ones that are really. And I think that tells you that there are a lot of people that are really disenchanted right now with some of the stuff that's going out there. They hear it and then they're confused and they're like, why would you let this happen? But that's where we are, and so
And
I
you're
think
talking more of the bigger picture leadership things, like the culture of Disney, right?
yes,
because
yes, the
because
things.
I'm actually going through. They get a lot of criticisms for like park stuff, and I actually just pulled up a list of in the last 5 years the new attractions at Disney. And I think conventional wisdom when we talk about this is like, well, they're way behind Universal and they haven't really innovated. But man, 5 years ago they opened Rise of the Resistance. You
Hmm.
know, they, and since then you have Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. You have Tron, Cosmic Rewind, Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. It's some incredible like new attractions that it's kind of remarkable to me that those kind of get forgotten and like amidst all this. And I think it's actually, I say remarkable, it's remarkable in the sense I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think that tells you just how much the culture stuff is overshadowing the good things that are happening, right?
I think so. I mean, so many people can voice their opinions now, but and Bob Iger said that in an interview I saw recently. He said, "Hey, we've known they were building this park, and that's why we've been adding all these attractions because And I said in a recent thing in a recent episode we talked about that I would prefer them to enhance all the parks personally over build another park because I don't have but so much time when I go there. It's hard enough to get to every four parks already. If
Sure.
there was a fifth gate, I don't even know how. You would have to cut another park from your trip to go. So I do like that they've enhanced. I do like that I do think that adding a land like Star Wars was a great addition, but I do think like for every person that says Rise of Resistance is great, there's somebody else out there saying Smuggler's Run is good the first time, and then you're like you don't want to do it again, and there's a lot of criticism because a lot of things like the characters aren't there. The old Star Wars story isn't there. I mean, there's just a lot of things people can still complain about, which I never hear. I never hear anybody say about the Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
You're right. You're exactly right.
It's like they nailed it. They nailed it. And it's not that I enjoy. I like Star Wars Land. I like the feel of it. I do think it's missing something nostalgic. Other than seeing the Millennium Falcon. So all those things, it's like I love it, but I can see why some people criticize it, and I love it. I've loved going to eat the food, loved going to ride the rides. I've loved trying to when you finally get your chance. I think in all the times we've ridden Smuggler's Run, we got to fly one time. We got to pilot. I mean, one time. Usually you're in the back seat pushing buttons while a child flies and because it seems a lot of times they give the pilot to a kid when I've been there. So there's things like that make people criticize.
Well,
And
David, you got to sometimes just speak up and say, "No, kid, I'm piloting."
actually, I mean, there's even pressure there. I mean, that's the thing. You're in. I wish that it was a four-seater because it's a
Yeah.
six-seater. So you're usually with. It's almost impossible unless you're a group of six. you're with somebody you don't know, and like I don't even really want to fly because now I've got this pressure that everybody's watching the score that you're going to get if you're the one flying. So it's like it's not it wasn't the best thought out thing. I wish that there were definitely some four-seater configurations, or they just let you go with your group and
Or
you know.
everybody somehow can like like I remember Men in Black. You're in a group of six, but everybody's score adds to the team score, and you're on your own too.
Well,
So
this that you do. I mean, it
oh
does. I mean, because you've got gunners and you've got engineers and you've got one person's controlling whether the ship goes up and down, and one's doing side to side. But the one that's controlling the flight pattern is the one that's hitting things. So it's a bumpier ride if you're running into mountains
They just
along
need
the
to make it
way.
a 5-seater and have the
But anyway,
pilot control both up and down and left and right.
it would be a little bit easier. Easton and I, when I got to fly, Easton was we were flying together. I don't remember if I was side to side or up and down, but I'm no space jet pilot.
Well, I don't know that piloting was the best thing for me to do on the first time riding it.
Yeah, because you don't even know what's going to happen. Yeah. But you still did better than me, and I had ridden it before.
well, all that to say, the stock price today is 112, which is kind of still closer to the low than the high in terms of the last 5 years. But I will say this, like it has been pretty resilient. That when it gets down around the $80 level, which the market cap then would be 150, 140 billion dollars, I think just personally, I've got alert set to always buy when it gets down there. Because Disney's the properties, the intellectual properties they own, the real estate is worth more than that, right? So
Right.
I do think it's long term still a good investment, and also it's usually a good time to buy when things aren't seemingly the sentiment is not as good, right?
Right.
Um,
Well, I
so
do think that everybody agrees, in media, that the parks are the income generator for the company, and which is amazing when you really think about a company that's really a movie company. Uh, it's the Florida part, which a lot of
mhm.
people criticize gets the least investment because you see a lot with we a lot going on in Disneyland Paris, big announcements there. Disneyland just got this expansion approved by the city of Anaheim, and it feels like sometimes, especially with Epic Universe coming to Orlando, that the Walt Disney Park seems to get the least amount of attention. But again, we know that in the past 5 years there has been rise. There has been Guardians of the Galaxy, which no other park has. So there are some big things, but I think it's the movie sentiment and the political sentiment that must be driving that.
Yeah.
The movie that sentiment's not the right word. You know what I mean? That the confidence in the movie production is
There's a lot of
dropping.
politics involved.
And we
There's
talk we
lifelong fans. We've talked a lot about that. Yeah.
I've seen multiple articles lately that talk about just how important it is that Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Mufasa, these movies coming this year, that they need to earn like a billion each. They're like they need $4 billion sellers just to kind of pull out of the where they are. So again, I love talking about the stock
Yeah.
because to me it's about what people's to me there's
Sure.
also the part that's people's perceptions.
I think it's
But I mean
mostly
that's
perceptions.
but
Yeah.
a lot of it is business, and it has nothing to do with whether the what a lot of people think about the park. So
Yeah.
I'm not a financial advisor of any kind. It's just interesting to watch how things work and whether the people have confidence in where the company is.
Well, every now
And
and then
I
you'll hear like somebody throw this out there, and I'll throw this out there to you guys. The current at today's trading price, the market capitalization of the company, which is what the company is worth when you take all the shares outstanding times the stock price, is $205 billion right now. Okay, so last October It was around 140, $150 billion. Okay. Now, Apple has that much cash in the bank, plus much more than that. It makes you think. Now, I'm not talking about how much Apple's worth. I'm talking about how much cash they have on hand. After seeing what Elon did with Twitter, some people are surprised some big company hasn't come up and said, "All right, we'll just buy the whole thing." There's always people always throw Apple out there or Microsoft out there as someone who could be in a finance, or Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, someone who could come in and buy a company big enough to buy a company like Disney. What does that make you feel when I say something like that, David?
I don't know. I think most people are afraid that if a company came in, and it was argued with all this with the Trian Group and Nelson Peltz, that they want to come in and break up the company. That definitely happened in the 80s. There was a big scare of that in the before Eisner came in and all that.
So you would not be happy if an Elon Musk or an Apple or a Microsoft or a Warren Buffett came and bought Disney outright.
I'm not sure what would be best. I do like the fact. I do like the thought of the Walt Disney Company staying its own company, because I like the movies and the parks personally just all being the way it was when it was created. And I think a lot of people would be afraid that another company would split things up, sell things off. There was a big threat of that, years ago in the 80s. And so I like it all being together. The amazing thing, though, is that the parks would do better if the movies weren't taking all the profit. And so I don't know. But I like it staying together. I wish they could keep the company strong without the influence of somebody else. Personally, that's just me.
I would tend to agree with you. I don't know what you think, Easton, but I do have an idea, maybe for us and our listeners. What if we all pulled our money together, and and maybe we get some other podcasters in on this too, or whatever, and we just all and try to come up with. You'd probably need 240 billion to give a good enough offer to make it serious. Maybe 250, but if we come up with 250 billion dollars, then we could buy it, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I just saw an article in the news this week that said that Americans throw away 68 million a year in the trash.
Whoops. Well, daggone.
68 million. There's a company that's in the Northeast that has pulled 10 million from the landfill.
Wow.
And that's what they're going through now, and they're using metal detectors to go in and pull out the money, and they say they estimate 68 million a year. Jeez. Is what we throw away in the trash. Pennies, quarters, dimes, nickels that we don't know we threw away. Probably paper money too. If we throw away that much change, there's no telling what gets tossed in the trash. But isn't that amazing that people could throw away that much and not
There's
even
a
realize?
Start. 68 million. That's now we just need
everybody pull. If we just all
100
pull our
times
pocket
that.
change. Everybody get some big Mickey-shaped bucket and throw all your change in it, and then we'll all buy the company out and make it right.
Perfect.
Man, can you imagine if you had a big group like that and everybody pulled it, then nobody would agree on what to use the money for.
Well, the way that works is, in practicality, there are still companies that are employee owned, right, or
Right.
private, and they somehow they divvy up ownership with employees. They still have CEOs and a board and way you get to vote on those people, but that's about the extent of your influence. So in this particular case, the three of us would make all the decisions, and everyone else would just what I'm saying. So I think it's a pretty good deal.
Free Mickey bars for everybody.
Unless it costs us too much money, David. Come on.
Free fast passes for everybody.
When we talk about corporate things, and that's where most of the news is right now. I know there's some things like Disneyland Paris there's a name change there. David, you were telling us about that. What's sentiment? But tell me what that is, and then kind of what you think and what the sentiment has been in the Disneyverse.
I have not watched a lot of content about it. About I mean, other than reading articles, but just news articles. But they're changing the Walt Disney Studios Park, which is the second gate at Disneyland Paris. They're changing the name to Disney Adventure World, and which is interesting. I did see some fun poked at the word adventure because we've got Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a new cruise ship called Adventure. We've got the California Adventure Park. This seemed like they liked that word a lot. So I was, interesting that they picked that. But the idea with Disney Studio Parks is like Hollywood Studios, is that you were going to a backlot. You were going to a real studio. And when Disney Hollywood Studios opened, it was Disney MGM Studios, and they did really make product there. You went to a backlot where you saw the Golden Girls house. You went to stages where you saw different things in production, and you did production tours that were all pretend, but they were to give you the feeling of what it was like to be in a movie set, and that whole thing has kind of run its course in their minds, and people aren't interested in seeing how the movies are made or being behind the scenes of the movie. They want to be in the movie. Yeah. And so, and a huge part of that just is, without a doubt, Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I mean, it has set the bar for everything, and which is kind of surprising when they did again A Galaxy's Edge, that you don't really feel like you're in a movie. You feel like you're just in a setting that's similar to a movie, and that there's the Millennium Falcon. It could be any movie. Right. And so that's where it'd be like if you went. So as they build these new lands, like in Tokyo, they're building Frozen Land. Well, if you went to Frozen Land and you didn't see the castle in Arendelle, you'd be like, well, I'm kind of in a Frozen Land, but it's not. I don't see anything from the movie. That would be weird, wouldn't it?
Yep.
So I think that's where they know now. Like, we got to put people right in the movie, not just in a pseudo kind of. So apparently this, like when you go to Hollywood Studios, you go into a 1920s, 30s California that Walt would have arrived in when he first got to California. Then you hit the studios part where you go to the different lands and different sets. And I think they've kind of had that in Paris. It's a much smaller scale when you go in. It's what that little Hollywood area is before you hit the studios part. But their studios part is, they talk about Imagineering story. You would just see these big massive buildings that are supposed to be sound stages, but it wasn't as exciting. Wasn't very beautiful. Wasn't very, compared to the Magic Kingdom park there. Just wasn't very beautiful. So now I think they're gonna rethink those ideas. They said now, instead of going to old Hollywood, you're going to be it's like you're going to a movie premiere, and then you're going to enter all these new lands. So there sounds like a lot of retheming. So they've already got the Disney the Avengers Park area. They've got a Toy Story area. So I don't know how they're going to fit all that they've got there. But there's rumors that they're going to add a Frozen area. There's rumors of a Peter Pan. There's rumors of a Tangled area, I think. So those are some of the things that are rumored. But we'll just have to wait and see what they pick. There's lots of things they could do, but it's interesting that they would retheme a whole part, but they really did that with California Adventure too. I mean, that had a big retheming. So when we were there, I was really surprised how little is in that park. I think only a handful of attractions, but we couldn't have handled any more because we only had 3 days to try to do it all. And if there'd been a lot more, we would have had more days. So we weren't going, oh man, there's not enough here. But if you were there a lot, it needs more. It needs a lot more added to it to make it a 2-day park. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as far as your comment on the rebranding, and seems to be kind of an ongoing theme with whether it's adventure or not. But people like adventures. You know what I mean? I know that would annoy like a songwriter that they use the word too much. But Easton, you like adventure, right?
Yeah, I like feeling like I'm on an adventure. I think it's kind of funny that they're using that word everywhere, but that's the only way I can think that to make it make sense for me is that they just want to make people visiting feel like they're going on an adventure somewhere. And I guess the only way for them to do that is to throw the
Sure.
word adventure in the name.
And I mean, how many more names are there? Like, you know, like that are any good? You know, I want to see what they went with, what was on the drawing
Yeah.
board before they settled on this one.
Quest is in there, but see, quest kind of implies that you've got to do a little bit of work.
Right.
And adventure is a fun. It's like you're going on a journey, but it's fun. You never hear adventure is not usually a negative word.
Yeah. Totally.
It just has a positive context. Whereas quest and some other things like that, I suppose, can feel.
It's also in Paris. You know what I'm saying? Like, is there other things called adventure in Paris? You know what I mean? Like, if it was like everything in Magic Kingdom had adventure on it, that would be one thing. But, you know, it's a little picky to be like, well, the second gate in Paris is getting a name with adventure in it, and they already have this, this, and this, you know? So,
Yeah.
you know, we got, bloggers got a blog.
Yeah, but I do think there's a lot of crisscross in the fandom of all these parks. There are really people that do try to get to all these parks,
That's true.
and so
Well, that brings us to the next thing with the parks, and again with Disney, everything's under a microscope all the time, and it's no different with their new DAS policy, with their disability services that they've had. And I've been kind of never really understood what this was about. And Easton was explaining before we started that this isn't like if you have a disability, you don't just rush to the front of the line. This works a little differently than that. Easton, what did you find out about that?
Well, yeah, so that's what I thought it was too before doing more looking into it. But it's really what it is this is an article from NBC News that I'm seeing. The free program is intended for guests with a developmental disability such as autism or similar. That's what they say. Then you don't really just walk to the front. You go to the line, like, for example, Space Mountain. So if Space Mountain's a 45-minute wait, if that's the time posted on their queue, that you basically, they say, okay, come back in 45 minutes, and you're basically getting like a fast pass to walk to the front of the line then. So you still have to wait the 45 minutes. It's just not in line. It's somewhere that I guess is not as overstimulating for people.
So I'm incredibly unfamiliar with this program. I've never been with anybody who used it, or never even occurred to me that was a thing, right? And so have you guys had any experience with this policy? Do you know anyone or been to the park with someone who has utilized this?
I have not, and I've had no. I really can't weigh into that. I do have a brother-in-law who's in a wheelchair, who has been in a wheelchair since college. He could not transfer from his chair to a vehicle. It wouldn't even be possible. So if he were there, he could only do things that were his wheelchair accessible, like a Hall of Presidents or things like that. So there would be no Space Mountain anyway. So as a family, I can't imagine some of the things that people have experienced. And I did see one other criticism I saw was that Disney is considering to give this to a third party organization like Universal does, and it will not be them patrolling or monitoring the system anymore. And I think one of the things that was changing was the size of your party was getting smaller now. And I do know that often if you had someone in your group with a disability, especially a child, if they had multiple disabilities, you might not be a family of four. Right. You might have 8 to 10 people all working together to make this happen. And if everybody's not allowed to be a part of the group, that was one thing that did raise that would be tough if they make the party size of the group smaller, because you might be a larger group together. It's what's really sad is that with everything that's meant for good, there are people that take advantage of it. And
that's what's leading to this change in policy, right? It's kind of it's being perpetuated. It's kind of like talked about as a crackdown on the abuse of this program in the past. That's right. At least what I'm reading, right? I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the sentiment.
It sounds like it. I mean, I have never seen, I've not witnessed that, so I really don't know. I mean, I do know that there would be two things that would make Disney change this process. One, the people are abusing it, or two, something's more profitable. I mean, that would be the two reasons, and they could be trying to be more profitable in some way, and pose it as people are abusing it. But just knowing people, there it probably is being abused, and that's a really sad thing because there are a lot of people that really need help just to be able to go. And I would never, who would not, when you see people, when there are people that really need help, or they can't go, most people would really want people to have assistance. You would never want to think, oh, they can't go because it just, uh,
Sure.
and I definitely know that there are a lot of children that do have, you know, overstimulated, and crowds could make it impossible to go to something like this. But a lot of those kids, in a way, the same. Even the shows
Yeah,
would be too
and that's the thing
stimulating.
too. There's this fine line. I think we talked about it before we got going here today between just sort of like a company who has a product or a theme park or an experience that they want as many people as possible. They want everyone to experience it because that's more money and more profitability and everybody they want everyone to be happy. However, some of these experiences, when you go and get in line for Space Mountain, they have that long list of things. If you're pregnant, if you have back problems, if you have heart problems, if you and they give you this, don't get on this ride if you're any of these things. And each of those things eliminates another group of people. By very definition, not everyone is welcome on Space Mountain, right? For
Exactly.
so at some point you and again I don't I want to be very careful how I say this, but there's a personal responsibility element of if I have a child who's sensitive to crowds and lights and loud noises, maybe I should consider whether a theme park is the right place for me to vacation, right, to begin with. Now, that said, I appreciate and hope Disney would make the park as accessible to everyone. And I actually think these policies are fantastic. I'm glad they exist because a kid with autism that can't stand still for 45 minutes or an hour for this line to be able to get a fast, I think that's incredible. And I actually, when I'm reading through some of the criticisms, it feels like in this case a lot of the criticism is a little bit, in my opinion, a little kind of much, considering that Disney is trying to bend over backwards to get the right people what they need to experience more attractions. I'm reading this. I don't want to out it, but this people article where there's a Disney. The headline is Disney fan with eye disorder says she no longer feels welcomed at park after disability guidelines change. And they go on and tell all about her story and whatnot. And it turns out that she loves Disney and all these things. It's not like she's ever had an issue or that they've ever disregarded her need. It's the fact that they changed the policy seems unwelcoming to her. So now there's an article in People magazine talking about how Disney is not as inclusive as it used to be, right? Because of this some sort of, you know, sentiment. Again, not even applicable truth, but sentiment. And that kind of, I think, I want to defend Disney a little bit. That seemed a little unfair to me, right? They're trying to make this policy where more people can be accommodated, but people also, so they won't abuse it, so that the right people can actually get better access to these rides and attractions. And it sort of honestly irritates me a little bit. And again, I don't know all the details, but when people just sort of freak out for what seems like no real good reason. You know what I'm saying?
But and I agree with you. But on the same side, Disney has talked so much about inclusivity and made it such a talking point that anything you do that excludes anybody is going to raise alarms, and you better be really careful where you're going with that. I do think that again, some of it's just where we are in culture right now. Again, having someone in my family who's paralyzed, who's in a wheelchair most of his entire life, since college, and he would never. I mean, because we've seen so many changes through the years, just access to restaurants, access to anything. I mean, people can't even imagine what it was like 25 years ago, for somebody who actually lived in a wheelchair. There is so much better now than it was then. But
Sure.
even now, it's not easy. I mean, it's still a challenge because places often think they're accessible, but they really haven't thought through all the needs of somebody who's really in a chair and really needs help. And so but my point is he would never if for some reason he was at a Disney park, he would never be going, "Oh, what do you mean this isn't accessible for me?
Right.
Why do I have to transfer my chair?" Because he's lived the reality of living with this struggle his entire life. But we have a lot of people now that expect everything to be a chance to go to the front of the line, and that's really difficult because a lot of people haven't had that, and now we're kind of in a new age where things are expected that really weren't expected even 10 years ago. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I was reading through the actual policy, which I wasn't even aware of until the controversy, right? That they change it and now I'm aware of it. But I'm reading through, and basically what you do is in advance, you get on a video conference call with a Disney cast member, and you go over your issues, go through your disability and why you would need disability access services, and they either approve or deny you. What they're doing is or you could do it on site as well, and
Right.
they're vetting you, and I don't see why that would be an issue. I think that I would imagine that a Disney cast member is not sitting there like, Disney cast members are the most welcoming, nice people that love their jobs on the planet, that want everybody to feel included. Can you imagine them, that you getting on a call and them just looking at you like, all right, prove it to me? It's not like that. They want to make accommodations for you, right? And I think actually it's a great step. Just the fact that you have to interact with a cast member to get this access, that by itself is the screen for a lot of people that would try to cheat the system. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I do think that the fear is that maybe even especially with it going to a third party company, that there would be somebody there that was like, well, you got to prove to me that you have this need, and that people are like, well, I shouldn't have to show you my medical records to prove that I have a need. So that's the flip side of it. But again, that could just be people that are angry because they don't have a real need. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I think it's
interesting.
it's really sad if for all the people that really have needs, that they need help getting in the park. I hope somehow this makes it better for them, and and that the system will somehow be good. And if it's not, that it'll be exposed,
Sure.
and that they'll have to fix it.
No, I
Because
agree. I agree. I just, as I read through this, we were so critical of Disney in so many areas. I felt a little bad that they're trying to make a policy that helps people a little better. And again, I would even argue that able-bodied guests exploiting this policy is bad for everyone, especially
right.
disabled people. And I think it's actually, a lot of people have skipped over the fact that Disney's actually trying to make this policy better for the people it's intended for by
Right.
changing this.
I am, and again, I would go back and say if this change had been made 6 years ago,
Yeah,
there might not be negative press right now.
you're probably right.
It
You're
would have
probably
been
right.
like, oh, look what Disney's doing, but because everything's under a microscope right now, I think that's why we get a negative spin on everything. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. That's where we are in everything right now. It's hard to know what's the best thing, and only time's going to tell. We just gotta hope.
Sure. Easton, have you, researching this and looking into this, have you found anything that we're skipping over that would add context to this issue?
Not really anything that would add context. The only thing that I don't, and maybe I just missed it, maybe I haven't found an answer to it, and there is one. The only thing I don't quite understand, I think it's a great, I'm with you, Dustin. I think this is an awesome policy put in place to try to help make it a magical experience for anyone that wants to go to the parks. I read that Disney does not require proof. I'm not saying like they should be asking for medical records. I'm not saying that at all. It's just they don't require proof, which makes it a little easier for anyone to like hop on a call with somebody and say this, that, and the other. Let me have this thing. But they're also saying, like, if Disney finds out that you've lied about it, they will ban you for life if they find out that you're trying to exploit this. But that's where my disconnect is I don't know how they can find out unless you have somebody that's just kind of like bragging about the fact that they were able to get in and use it and someone overhears it. I don't know the best way to like minimize that if they're not requiring proof.
Right.
But I don't know the best way to do that either.
It's not an easy one to navigate. That is for dang sure. But it will be interesting to see how it plays out. If they keep the policy, if they change it again, it seems there's new articles written. This is about 2 weeks old. When this news broke, and it seems like a steady drumbeat of criticism. So sometimes it dies down, sometimes it doesn't. So I guess we'll see, and we'll talk about it in the future if it doesn't. And so it's really, really interesting as well. But I think that's there. The only other little news that I saw some really cool pictures of Tiana's Bayou adventure. They're testing the lighting. I don't know if that means like an opening. The ride opening is close, but it does. The lighting looks amazing. I'm really excited to see it finish.
Most of the rumors are that they're trying. I mean, that it will open this summer. That it could open in June, and so yeah, sounds like it's awesome. For the Disney World. The Disney World's going to open, I believe, first before Disneyland.
Yeah, I'm looking at like moss on like mossy oak trees and things like that around there. It looked really, really cool. So I hope, we were kind of, always skeptical when they changed something and they closed down a fan favorite and Splash Mountain and rethemed it to Tiana's Bayou Adventure. But I think most people are kind of getting excited to try this out. Are you, David?
I hope it's great. I mean, it's the same ride, so right. It's going to be a fun ride. The attraction part, what it does is it sets the mood. It's like Tower of Terror or Mission Breakout, the Guardians of the Galaxy version. It's the same ride basically, but some versions are, if you ride in the Tower of Terror, you're going to hear people scream. And if you ride the Guardians of the Galaxy version, you're going to hear people laugh. Same thing's happening, but there's just something about the atmosphere of the ride. I mean, Splash Mountain had a certain atmosphere. Will this have the same thing? Will it give you the same joyful feeling? That was just some fun thing. I think it will. I think that, this is a great story. If they'll kind of keep those characters and everything just like they are in the movie, it has a great shot. It's coming either way, so gotta find the good in it. It's gonna be good. I'm believing it's gonna be good. And I'm way more concerned about the other things that might go away. Yeah, like we talked about last time. I heard definitely more rumors, whatever, that Cars, Radiator Springs, that ride is definitely that's coming. So I've heard more talk of that. So it sounds like that could be a really true rumor.
Well, I'm excited to see what happens with this and to talk to you guys again about it next week. I think for now, that's all. There's always a list of little things we could talk about, but man, I think we've hit the big ones for this week, and I always love talking with you. Y'all have anything else to add or anything else going on in your lives, man? I don't want to cut you off short.
Oh, it was good.
Always an interesting conversation with you guys. We love discussing these things. And if you're at home listening and would love to put your 2 cents in, tell us what you think. Do you know anyone who's taken advantage of the disability service? Do you have opinions or thoughts on that? Hit us up. You can find us at whyilovedisney.com, on Twitter and on Instagram. And as always, we'd love if you would give us a review on Apple or Spotify, either one, whichever you listen on. 5 stars preferably, but we appreciate your time. I always love hanging out and talking with you guys. One of the highlights of my week, guys, and I hope that you have a great rest of the week.
See you guys later. It was fun.
See ya.
Bye-bye.